Baroness Neville-Rolfe.
I beg leave to ask the question, standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, safety is our top priority, especially for our most vulnerable road users and disabled people, and there will be no new categories of e-cycles and e-scooters before the impacts on these groups have been thoroughly considered. Any new regulations will be subject to public consultation before they come into force, and they will be designed with disabled people, not for them, utilising the Government's independent expert committee, the Disabled Persons Transport Advisory Committee.
There are a number of troubling features about e-scooters and indeed e-bikes, and disagreements on solutions, so licensing, insurance, speed restrictions, and better enforcement, such as the impounding of vehicles ridden on pavements, which is actually my favourite. And the problem is getting worse. It's Wild West out there. Deaths, injuries, growing fear by the disabled and elderly, not to mention the mushroom of crime. Will the Minister ensure that early action is taken, and at the very least, could he work with the Mayor and with the Met to introduce much more robust action in London, where this is such a problem?
I certainly understand the noble Baroness's point. As far as e-scooters go, the last government commissioned the trials in 2020. Legislation was promised in 2022 but not delivered. That trial is therefore still in force, and the length of time is regrettable. There was a very similar question which was answered on the last sitting day before Christmas. It is a complicated area. We do need to work out what the best forms of regulation are. And I note her plea to me to talk to the Mayor and to the Metropolitan Police. Of course, the enforcement of these regulations is always a matter for chief police officers. And I know that the Mayor is as concerned as the government is about this.
My Lords, the is a real problem. At the moment, they are limited to 50 miles an hour, but hardly any of them observe it. By simple modifications, two things can happen. The speed can be increased to 30 miles an hour, and by pressing on a button, they maintain the speed without any cycling. So that really we should have something done about that. But with all the things that Baroness Neville-Rolfe has mentioned, and I've argued that cyclists should be legislated against, but what's the argument for not legislating for registration marks, licensing and insurance for e-cycles, which in 2023 killed the most people on the roads that we've ever seen?
I certainly know that the noble Lord has a strong view on this. We had a debate in the autumn, and as I say, we had a question on this before Christmas. He is right in saying that there is a limit to the legal use of pedal cycles, maximum assisting speed of 15.5 miles an hour and maximum power of 250 watts. And it is clear that there are plenty of these cycles which have either been sold or been adapted which do in excess of that, and actually, as a result, are in fact motor vehicles and should be licensed, registered, licensed, ridden and insured as such. But it is in the end up to the chief police officers to enforce this. And I think what he's remarking on is a subject which is of growing concern in our urban areas and should be addressed by chiefs of police.
My lords, many bikes are being imported from abroad that are illegal. Has the government any plans to clamp down on the illegal importation of vehicles that shouldn't be on the road?
My noble friend is right. There are plenty of imports and there are plenty of illegal sales of these in this country. It's a trading standards matter, and there has been some action. And if I leaf through these pages fast enough, I would find the statistics for what we know about what has happened so far. But of course, that is a local authority matter. We do need legislation in the end. It is a shame that it didn't start with e-scooters. the government is committed to doing something, and the subject of the original question, which is the effect on disabled people, is clearly of great concern, and we will seek to address it.
My Lords,
I'm really grateful that the Minister just referred to disabled people. Many people in wheelchairs are finding the dockless bikes being dumped all over the pavements mean they not just have a problem, but they can't go down the street. And just before Christmas, the RNIB most recent survey of their members said 47% of respondents had said that they felt unsafe on the pavements. Would the government consider ensuring that e-scooters and e-bikes are more visually and audibly detectable? It doesn't matter if they're illegal, they are on the pavements and causing problems. And will they please ban dockless bikes?
I certainly recognise the passion with which the noble Baroness speaks. Of course, the government published before Christmas the English Devolution White Paper, which has in it a provision for local transport authorities to be empowered to regulate on-street micromobility, that's e-bikes and e-cycle schemes, so that local areas can shape these schemes and tackle the scourge of badly parked cycles and e-cycles and scooters.
My Lords, as well as being potentially criminally ridden, these vehicles are also being used in the course of committing crime. And in 2023-24, there were 11,000 offences recorded involving the use of e-bikes and e-scooters, a huge growth on previous years, and there is no sign of abatement. Does the noble Lord and his government have a plan for curbing this epidemic?
It's easy to recognise the position that the noble Lord Moylan talks about, and indeed he talked about it in very similar terms the week before Christmas. It is primarily a matter of enforcement by chief police officers, simply because, as he says, there may or may not be a crime in relation to the use of e-scooters and e-bikes, but there are crimes being committed as a consequence of using them. This debate is one of the ways of drawing it to the attention of chief police officers so that enforcement is appropriately given.
My Lords, despite rental e-scooters being legal for use in public places in some English cities, they remain illegal on the roads and footpaths of Northern Ireland. However, they do sometimes appear, which prompted the Police Service of Northern Ireland to take to social media before Christmas to warn that any e-scooters gifted in the province could only be used on private land. Using these good offices, can the noble Lord the Minister offer an assurance that any possible change to the legal status of e-scooters in Northern Ireland will not happen without full and proper consultation with the PSNI?
I'm certainly willing to commit to consultation with all the enforcement authorities about this, because it is very important when we are able to do something about this that actually the law is framed in a way that is possible to be enforced both in Northern Ireland and elsewhere.
Lord, one of my concerns is the number of scooters and bikes, whether electric or otherwise, ridden on the pavements. Has he any statistics as to the number of people injured or killed by this method in this country?
I certainly do have statistics about the number of people injured and killed in cycling in general. I don't believe that there are statistics specifically about these things being ridden on pavements, but I'm not wholly sure that we need to see that, because actually it is quite clear that riding e-scooters, e-bikes and bicycles on pavements is the wrong thing to do. And if we look at the subject of the original question, which is about the effect on the disabled, it's clearly a threat to the mobility of disabled people to find either these cycles and scooters being ridden or just dumped on the pavement. They're both not satisfactory for the mobility of our disabled people in Britain.
My Lords, given the huge safety concerns, what is the timescale for new legislation to regulate private electric bikes and e-scooters?
The It is a shame that the previous government didn't carry through its intention to legislate in 2022. Deciding what the overall legislative policy of the government should be is above my pay grade, but it is clear that this is an issue that we need to confront, and the department is thinking very clearly. And the noble Baroness will recall, and indeed I wrote to her to show her the variety across Europe and wider countries of rules and regulations for these things, and the department is thinking about this in advance, simply because actually framing this legislation is going to be more difficult than it might be because of the range of solutions adopted in other countries.